me to press record. We are recording this. I had a few messages today from people that said, oh, I now can't make it, but will you be sending out a recording? So just to make you aware. When you signed up to this webinar, you popped your email in to get the details. That means you will get occasional emails from myself and Lisa with what we think are helpful tips. If you don't think they're helpful, just click unsubscribe on them. But to be transparent in terms of your email address. If you've got any questions, if you can pop them in the Q&A box, that would be brilliant. We have left time at the end for questions. So if you've got any questions for Lisa or myself, you can do that. And our Twitter handles are on the slide here for anybody who tweets. I'm at Summit Fundraising and Lisa's at saving_giving. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I was saying earlier, I know some of you it'll be very early for you. Others may have had a really long day at work. So thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Louise Morris. I'm based in the UK and I've helped over 100 charities raise more large gifts. So I previously worked in fundraising. I've been a director of fundraising or director of development, as some of you will know it, and I'm a trustee of a small nonprofit. And I met Lisa, one of these lovely online meetings, somebody new in lockdown, because Rory Traynor, who's a Scottish fundraiser, thank you, Rory, introduced us. So I'd already read Lisa's book. As you can see, it is well thumbed and well penciled all the way through. And I do a lot of coaching and training with fundraisers, with trustees, with fundraisers, with charities. And it is just the kind of approach that I try and endorse. And what I love about it is it's just not me from a fundraising side saying it. For me, it's got loads of power because it's a philanthropist saying it. So Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the book to start off?
Sure, absolutely. So thank you again for putting this all together. It's just done a wonderful job, and thank you, Rory, out there. So I live in Los Angeles, and about 10 years ago, our family, I was raised very much middle class, and we weren't really donors per se. I would do some work for CARE or UNICEF or things like that as a volunteer. And I would, but we really weren't, it wasn't, you know, my parents would contribute to the local school, but that was about it. And we're not a wealthy family. And about 10 years ago, my husband's company went public, and my company was sold, and we're both serial entrepreneurs, and we found ourselves almost overnight being wealthy. And the first thing that we thought was, because I think everybody should think this at that moment, is, you know, where are we going to make some big gifts? Because we really need to. And I think when this happens to people, there's a little bit of guilt too. So we decided that we wanted to make, well, I actually decided it was about 2 weeks before the IPO, and it looked like this was all going to happen. And I said to my husband, let's each pick one area that we're very interested in, that we think is important to us, and let's kind of kick it off that way. We had no idea where it was going to go because we didn't know about fundraising. I didn't even know that a development person or an advancement person meant a fundraiser. So I was very naive about it all. And I did serve on nonprofits as a volunteer and at our synagogue as a board member, but that was about it. So so I thought, okay, I'd like to give money to my synagogue because they had a capital campaign and they were short about $1 million. They'd been working on it for a few years, and to finish it off, it would have been that's how much they had to raise. So I was the incoming president for that organization. I'd been with them for several years as a vice president. I'm the incoming president, and so I called the senior executive and I said, he was a rabbi as well, and I said, you know, I have news for you. And she said, what kind of news? And I said, well, you know about that IPO that's happening? She said, yes. And I said, well, we've decided that we're going to give you that last $1 million to finish off the capital campaign. And she said to me, and if any of you have read the book, you can ignore this moment because you've already read about it, but it's in the book. And she said, so I called her and I said, we're going to give you this last $1 million. And she said, as our first major gift. And she said, I don't know what to say. And I thought, well, I don't know, I guess maybe you should say thank you. And she said, well, I don't know what I can say because I didn't make an ask. So I'm not sure what to do with that. And I was dumbfounded and thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And about I don't know, we got off the phone. I was stunned. She seemed stunned as well. And I got off the phone and um, the phone rang again. And my husband's about 10 feet away from me sitting on the sofa. And I said we looked at each other like, what's happening? And I picked up the phone and she says, may I speak to your husband? And that just really killed me because this woman was a feminist, still is. And I thought, wait a second, I'm the incoming president. And she has now said, I need to get approval from your husband. And she really did say to him, I want to make sure that like basically Lisa's not crazy, which I keep thinking, because there is a gender piece to all of this that I was learning. And I keep thinking that if I was a man and that same thing happened, can anybody imagine a place or a time where they would have called the wife and said that? And most people would say never. So it was really a shock. And then on the second gift, my husband, I said, okay, it's your turn. And he said, well, he's had Crohn's disease, which is like an irritable bowel syndrome, a lifelong disease, since he's been about 11 or 12. And he said, I want to make sure that no child ever has to go through what I went through with Crohn's disease. So let's figure out who has the very best research, who can help us to figure out how they can get rid of this thing. So I said, okay. And I said, why don't we try? He says, let's try Stanford or whatever, somewhere else. And I said, well, you've been treated at our local hospital. Let's call them and see. And they're a world-renowned hospital, Cedars-Sinai. And so I said, okay, let's find out what's there. I didn't even know who to talk to. I could call the doctors, but they weren't going to know. So I went to an event and found out that one of the chairman of the board of trustees happened to be there. And it was with some friends, and they said, "We'll introduce you. He's a really nice guy." So I asked him, and he looked at me like I was a little bit crazy. I said, we'd like to make a major gift for IBD. And he says, well, I guess you can call this guy. So he gives me the name. I, of course, call the hospital. They won't take my call. I then made a few more calls, got a kind of a junior development guy who took 7 months to accept my $2 million donation. I had to keep calling and calling and calling, and we would have meetings, but then he wouldn't follow up because he just didn't believe that we were for real. And he could have checked in public records to see that we're real, but he just didn't. And the good news of all of this is that Cedars-Sinai has now made our experience part of their onboarding program for all of their development people, which is really wonderful. So, and they actually are quoted in the book. So no harm, no foul, except that I did realize that most people wouldn't have taken 7 months and kept coming back for more abuse. But the program has done extremely well. We were rewarding actually one person. We endowed a chair at Cedars-Sinai. He's actually from London, and the doctor, and he has grown it into a 25-person research facility that has done all sorts of major things and has all sorts of patents and is helping all sorts of people. So it's been very, very rewarding. It was just getting started. There was a bit of a shock, and has continued to be.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lisa. And when I read the book, I mean, there are some really, frankly, if you're on the fundraising side, which I think most people are on this webinar, like cringe-worthy experiences that do not necessarily make you feel proud of being part of the nonprofit sector. And I was reading it thinking, oh, no, I'm sure like maybe it's a US thing, or I don't think UK charities do that. And then when I really racked my brains and thought maybe about events that we'd had with very wealthy people there when I was a fundraiser, and actually how genuine were we, and maybe some of the awkward asking we'd done, I think for me, the book was great in terms of maybe not everything we do as charities is maybe that extreme, but what may kind of unintentionally might happen if we haven't got this relationship building piece, which sounds simple, doesn't it? Relationship building piece, right? Lisa, I would love to hear on the flip side of some of your experiences, or an experience where it's been really positive, where you've just felt like brilliant, as you should. You're making such impact. You should have a great experience. So tell us a little bit about that.
I should, right? Yeah. So it's funny. I keep coming back to the same experience because there was one experience that was absolutely wonderful. And by the way, the Cedars-Sinai experience, after we got through that first year and people realized, that it was real money, I guess, that the money was green, they did treat me really well. And I've been very involved in work there. So that's been very gratifying. But I think my favorite story, which is most of the readers' favorite story too, is when we finished those two big gifts, we said, okay, now what? And I talked to a few different people who were introducing me to wealthy people and learning about foundations and things. And I said, okay, they said, pick out different areas you're interested in. So I thought, yeah, well, that makes sense. So I thought, okay, I want to have one thing that's local and one thing that's Jewish. So I had that synagogue thing, one thing that's international, one thing that's Israel, because we do work in human rights work there, and one thing with children and one with Crohn's disease. So those were our areas. And then we would add as needed, but that we wanted to figure out some areas so that, and we were not getting a deluge of calls, by the way, because we weren't on what I call the list. So since we hadn't been donating forever, people didn't know us. And even though it was public information, the only people who figured it out were the wealth managers and the finance people, the sort of stockbrokers. They called starting on the first day, but the nonprofits didn't realize, even after those big gifts, didn't even call us for probably about another year. So it was kind of a quiet year. It was nice. Anyway, so I went to this, I found this one guy, said, who knows about Los Angeles as well as anybody, because I'd like to do something that has a lot of local impact. And so I called this guy named David Levinson, you'll read about in the book, and he runs something called Big Sunday. And Big Sunday's been around for many, many years. And it's a citywide, it was actually co-sponsored by the city at one point when they were getting going. And it's a citywide event where they do everything from lunches for veterans and homeless people, and introducing people to each other, and Habitat for Humanity type things, and all sorts of stuff. And they do it all the time, pretty much every day. It used to be just one Sunday a year, now it's all the time. Anyway, so I called the head of it, and I heard he's a really nice guy, and I said, hi, I introduced myself, and I was referred by whoever, some friend, and can you come by, can we have a meeting, because I would like to make some sort of a contribution to the city, and I'd like to talk to you about it. He said, okay, of course. So he came over, did not require 7 months. He came over, I think, the next day, and we talked, and I said to him, we talked about the various areas that were problem areas, and he said, well, at this point in time, there's a huge issue with food banks, which of course there is now as well. And he said the food banks are running out of food about halfway during the month. And we're trying to figure out ways of replenishing that food, but he says, I'm getting lots of calls for that. And I said, okay, so what would it cost to use those food banks to feed everybody who's hungry in Los Angeles for 3 months? Just guessing, just 3 months. If you could do a month, 3 months, give me that price. And he said, I have no idea what it would cost, but I'll find out. So he left, and he called about a week later, and he said, I have your answer. And I said, great, what is it? And he said, well, I'd really like to come over and tell you. And I thought, oh, okay. So he comes over, and I said, so what's the answer? And he says, the answer is, I'm not going to give you an answer. And I said, what? And I thought, continues to be so strange, this world. And he said, I'm not going to give you an answer because it's not sustainable. And if we feed those people for 3 months, yes, they'll have food for 3 months. And then what? And then we're going to be back in the same problem. So why don't we use the money that you might have paid for that to create a program that is sustainable, that would be ongoing, that would replenish those food banks every month. And we called it the End of the Month Club. And it has been a huge success. It's been around now for about 8-9 years. And over the holidays, they actually do even more work, but they have fed hundreds of thousands of people at various times, and it's been a huge success. So that is exactly, I think, a model of how this works as a real partnership, not a partnership or a relationship that's kind of fake.
Thank you for that, Lisa. It's so good to hear. And it does happen. And I know a lot of people on this call will have, be building brilliant relationships. The thing that sticks out for me about that is just like honest conversations that we in the charity might think are going to be difficult, but to actually take that step and have them. And I think also understanding what was important to you and listening. And I think if it's one thing that a lot of fundraisers can do is when they're meeting somebody new, maybe like you were for this nonprofit, or even I know some of you will have inherited a list of donors, of bigger donors, is to pick up the phone, to have a meeting with them without agenda, not asking for money, to just say, I've just taken on this role. I see that you've been giving for 3 years. What made you start to give? What's your interest? Because I'm always amazed that sometimes we're so busy in our day-to-day jobs in fundraising that sometimes we don't go back to that. And that actually is at the essence of connecting. It's, the fact that was local and that you wanted your money to have huge impact locally, and that you had some ideas. I mean, wasn't it so important that your ideas were heard, even though that initial idea wasn't implemented? So I would say to kind of some, people working in nonprofits, whether you're a trustee or a fundraiser, to actually have those open conversations and to not go and feel you have to sell or pitch straight away, and to just understand somebody, because a lot of major donors, of course, aren't necessarily new to the charities and the non-profits, are they, Lisa? I know you were maybe in that instance, but a lot of your major supporters, you know, they might have been giving at lower levels for years. And I think to kind of understand them. And the other thing I think about that, certainly from the non-profit side, is it's just really enjoyable. The fundraisers I've coached and I know who have those genuine conversations and aren't constantly thinking target, money, just particularly actually in the pandemic, have just been really lifted, and they've got a lot of energy from it.
Right, and we have a lot of new donors here, and I think all over the world. There's a lot of people who are donating who have not donated before during the pandemic, and that's gold. And we need to really find out who they are and what they're about, even if they're a small donor. And I know the standard thought, at least here, what I'm hearing in other places too, is that you know, we just don't have the resources to go after anybody except for the wealthy people who we know. But then you're going to have people like me slip through the cracks, and that's not okay.
Yeah, and there's been a lot happening this week. I know quite a lot of you will have been celebrating Giving Tuesday, and quite a few charities I know have been doing thankathons. So trustees, supporters have just been calling people not to ask for money, but to say thank you. This is Giving Tuesday, and we appreciate you. And that is, it's just really wonderful to hear. So another area, Lisa, that there were many, but I had to narrow it down, that I loved in your book was just, I think we both agreed when we chatted, how kind of toxic really that intense pressure on non-profits can be to raise money and raise it fast. And obviously there is a lot of pressure, and I know a lot of organizations are under huge pressure this year because of the gaps in income that coronavirus has brought, and a rising need often. But you know, quick wins and unrealistic targets can really lead a culture of money, you're a rich person, money, as opposed to, you know, that listening, that genuine approach. You've got some great tips in the book on maybe, you know, what charities can do a bit differently, but could, you know, you just talk to us a little bit about that from, you know, your perspective outside the sector, really?
Right. So, gosh, lots of different parts to that. But one is that when you call somebody and you don't ask for money, I can tell you how I feel, and I know that it's how a lot of my contemporaries feel, is that people are so surprised to have a fundraiser call them and not ask for money and actually listen being the most important thing, I think, of all of this, that very often those people are going to be the ones who are giving you money. You'll say, no, it's okay. There was a story about a woman, I think it was in the US, but at the beginning of COVID, and she had an organization with dogs. It was saving dogs, stray dogs, something like that. And she said, one of the donors called her and said, what can we do to help? And she said, I don't feel, my dogs are okay. I've got them in a kennel. They're going to be okay for another few months or however long this takes. And so I really would prefer you give the money to, you know, another organization. And if you'd like to pick one, or to know of one, here's a few that I really like. And the person was so shocked by that, and I would have been as well, that they not only, of course, you probably know the answer, they gave money to the other organization, and they gave money to this organization, said, please take my money. So it's really interesting how it works. And I think in terms of issues from trustees or from management saying, you know, get the money quick, I always use a statistic that is pretty much, I think, the same all over. That's 60% of first-time donors do not donate a second time to that organization. So only 40% continue to donate on a good day, and 60% go away. So there's this churn that is absolutely ridiculous, extremely costly, and doesn't make much sense. So when you use that stat with people who are saying money, get it, then you really need to have a serious conversation about, do you really want us to spend to try and replace that 60% of people every single year? Or would you rather have something a little bit more long-term, where we don't have to be constantly bringing in these new people, because the existing people are going to want to stay? And most people, especially if they have any kind of business background, will immediately understand that. And some of them won't. Some of them, I tell people that I feel very often like a piggy bank, that from the fundraisers' perspective, they'd rather that I was a piggy bank, because I would be an inanimate object and I wouldn't talk back, and they could just smash me, take the money and run, which is really depressing. But I think every fundraiser needs to understand that there's a donor on the other side who is likely to think like I do. And a lot of them are likely to just say, I'm just done with this. I talked to one fundraiser actually in the UK, and he said, not fundraiser, donor. And he said, I just hang up the phone when that kind of thing happens. I just say, if somebody starts pushing me for money and pretending it's a hello phone call and they want to learn about me, but it's really money, 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 or why am I donating to my organization, the one I like, instead of your organization, then they just get fed up, and then the money just sits in accounts in many cases for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really sobering, to be honest. And, you know, I think that also can lead back to annual planning, which a lot of nonprofits will be going through, or either they've been through it if their years start in January or starting in April. And I think, you know, having those honest and difficult conversations internally as well. I've seen a lot of the time zeros be added on to a major donor target because it's the area of fundraising that's got rich people, right? So, you know, you'll be able to go and get $1 million dollar. Well, $1 million gift. Well, actually, or $1 million gift. Well, you know, dependent on where you're at with your major donor fundraising and the connections the charities have, you know, you might not have connections to anybody that can give at that level. So for me, like actually building a realistic but ambitious target kind of bottom up is really important. And so I would say if you don't have that process internally, you know, maybe think about that. I know a lot of people do, but to think, who do you know already who's giving you an indication, and actually what level might they give at? Because people get, I think what I often see, Lisa, is that it was a learning for me and a realization that the wealthiest people in society give at a whole range of giving levels, just as everybody else does. Somebody might give £2 or they might give £50. And I think there's sometimes a cultural piece that major donor fundraising is £1 million gifts or $1 million gifts, and to actually build a pipeline bottom up, because what it does for you as well internally is it gets some of those awkward conversations out. Because what happens quite a lot then is, okay, well, we'll try and raise an extra $1 million. Okay, we'll put it on the target. Maybe we'll find some rich person somewhere. You end up money grabbing. It doesn't work. You damage relationships. And then at the end of the year, in the last quarter, you have to say we're going to be down on target, which is, you know, quite demoralizing as a fundraiser. So yeah, I would say a tip for within nonprofits is have those conversations early and have them, because they might be a bit difficult, but they're a lot easier than waiting till your organization is expecting you to raise a very unrealistic amount.
And you might not get another chance, right? If you go to somebody and you screw it up, especially donors. One of the stories I like to tell people a lot that I think it kind of proves the point that there's a lot of these people out there on your donor list. I'm convinced that most donor lists, I can imagine, have a few people on there that actually are wealthy and you don't know it. Now, are they going to tell you? I don't know. But you're right. I mean, people right now put you in boxes. So you're the $1 million donors, or you're the $500,000 whatever donors, and you're the little donors, and you're the volunteers, and you're the, you know, whatever else. And you're not supposed to mix, and you're supposed to stay in your little box. And that's offensive, I think, from a donor perspective. And I also think it's just wrong, because like you said, people give it all different kinds of levels. So, but my story that I tell is about bequests. Many organizations have been saved this year because of not only, you know, their good work and adjusting during COVID, but also because of bequests coming in. And I call those surprise gifts. Most people don't obviously know that they're going to be happening. But when I've checked with different organizations about the bequests that have come in, and I always ask, who is this person? And more often than not, the person is not somebody who was a major donor. More often than not, the person is somebody who was a very small donor, very often a regular donor, but small, year after year after year. And you always hear these stories about the janitor who, you know, had $1 million, who gave it to whatever because they socked it away. There's a lot of people like that. And I'm finding even this year, when I ask those questions about who were those bequests from, very often, almost all the time, actually, they were people who, I would say 80% of the time, maybe, that's just anecdotal, but it's a large percentage. They're people who, you know, the strangest thing I encountered is a big organization said we have this bequest that came in and nobody can figure out who the person is. And I thought, well, that is really fascinating. There had to be a connection between that person and your organization. So, you know, you need to figure out who it is, but how sad that the person is giving the money to you they clearly had some interaction with you sometime over the years, and you don't even know who they are. So that is my sort of proof that this is very worthwhile to go through your list and really check and see who's there and who might be there who has a big pile of money or just might grow into it. And just like you said, the $25 donor, 25-pound donor, the 100-pound donor can become a bigger donor, and they might be a bigger donor. They're just kind of checking you out first with the lower amounts.
Yeah, thank you. Just a reminder to everybody who's joined us, if you have any questions for Lisa or myself, pop them into the question box because we've got time for it at the end. Yeah, just great advice. Thank you, Lisa. Really great advice. And it's so good to have that perspective from outside the nonprofit world as well. I mean, what I would love to see is fundraisers targeted not just on the money. And actually, you know, if a fundraiser is going to be having an appraisal, for a donor like yourself to be contacted, and actually for, you know, anecdotal feedback from donors to be taken into account on the relationship, for donor retention to be taken into account. And again, some nonprofits are doing this, but it's the few. And also I think for, you know, number of conversations and number of meetings that are going to be happening, because they're not always all about the money. But if you gave that lovely example earlier, that actually when someone's not asking for the money, you're so shocked, you're more likely to actually give them when it's genuine. So I think, you know, again, if you're not doing that in your nonprofit and you are doing some planning, or some of you will have the opportunities to set your own KPIs and your own objectives, it's to actually maybe put forward something different. And again, there is a bit of a shift towards that, but that could all help to not just be focusing on people and donors like yourself as kind of piggy banks, which you said, which is a kind of shocking analogy, but I think a really fair one, certainly from your experiences. But I think if we as a sector look at ourselves, there will be plenty of instances where we might look back and think, well, actually, no, we were desperate for the cash there, and maybe we didn't have the donors' heart, you know, interests at heart.
Yeah, and desperation doesn't get you anywhere. If you're looking for a job and you come in desperate, you're likely not to get that job. So it's just, it doesn't feel good at all. And what I would recommend is if every fundraiser, and perhaps trustees as well, and nonprofit heads, etc., to make one call a day to somebody on your list just to get to know them. Just one. That would be it. It would be phenomenal. It doesn't require a lot of, you know, there's pain and suffering. It's actually extremely gratifying, and it's a nice break from the constant, you know, go, get lots of money. And you might be surprised at what you find out.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. And I know some fundraisers who've been doing that. And, you know, a lot of fundraisers have been at home, and trustees, and, you know, we haven't got that face-to-face contact we had. And it is really energizing. And I think sometimes it's just, you know, it can feel a bit scary for some people to be calling up someone they think is going to be busy or he's really influential. But I know, you know, if you can find a way, whether that's as one fundraiser I'm coaching, who she goes for a walk around a block and then makes her 10 donor calls in the morning, because that kind of just puts her in a really positive frame of mind, because I know not everybody finds it easy to do. But as you said, the benefits you get just enjoying your role as a fundraiser as well, and obviously finding out about what's important to you as a donor, I think. And the pandemic really has been one of the good things about it. I think it's made that opportunity to check in with people really relevant, right? I mean, you know, when we were just having a chat, you know, I was finding out what was happening over in the US, and, you know, with your kids, and we were talking about highlights and, you know, all sorts. And it's not the same relationship because I'm obviously not working in a nonprofit, but just that kind of humanity and connecting that, you know, it's really rough right now. So to be calling your donors, even if they're giving at a lower level, and just saying, how are you doing? How's the year been for you? You've cared, you know, about us, and you've given in the past, and we wanted to check in with you. I think when that's been happening, a lot of UK nonprofits I know have actually been raising more. They've outperformed this year versus previous years.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't really understand that relationship term well enough. I think relationship sounds like a method to get to somebody's pocketbook, and I think sometimes you actually have a relationship, like with those bequest people I was suggesting, and you don't even realize you have it. Like somebody really has had something, some local person or a volunteer or a mailing you do, whatever it is, something has turned them on, and they have some sort of a connection to your organization. And if you make it really, you know, right now you can ask somebody, how are you doing? Like you said, you know, with COVID, and, you know, how's it been for you? Is it getting better? You know, whatever, we're hoping it's there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then, but you also have the holidays, you know, what are you doing over the holidays? Are you able to get out? And, you know, is there something I can do to help? I have a story that I tell about an Orthodox Jewish man in New York who sent me an email and said, I need to have a private conversation with you. I'm very concerned. I just did something bad. And I said, okay, he's a fundraiser. And I asked, okay, well, tell me what it is. So he called somebody, this was early in COVID, and he said to the person, how are you doing? And he started off the conversation like that. And the person said, oh, I don't have time. And he said, well, really, I'm really concerned. I work in nonprofits. How are you doing? Is there something I can do to help? And it turned out there was something he could do to help, that the person was having a really hard time. I think it was a health situation. And so he said to them, you know what, I'm calling you because I'm part of this organization, but let's take care of this problem now. Let me make a few phone calls for you and get you set. And he did, and the person was extremely grateful. And then he emailed me and he said, I feel guilty that that wasn't my job. And so I shouldn't have been giving him that referral. And that's crazy, right? Everybody should have been, you know, giving him gifts and saying that's the most brilliant thing ever, because that person was never going to give to you because they're ready to hang up the phone at the beginning. They weren't going to give to you again. But now you would actually have an opportunity for them to do that. But it's for a donor, from a donor perspective, when somebody says, really, how are you? Or somebody says, you know, how can I help? Maybe there's other organizations over the holidays you'd like to give to. I know a lot of these, I'm in a lot of organizations with them. As a donor, I would be so dumbstruck by the whole thing. I would just say, like, I can't believe you're really doing that. And then all of a sudden that trust, it just becomes trust and relationships and not money grubbing. It's a makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I love that example because it's just showing that you care. And I think we do all care, but when, you know, there's so much pressure on the money, sometimes that humanity kind of disappears a little bit. So I've been coaching a fundraiser this week, and they're an international development charity. And there was a big disaster in one of the countries where her donor's family was. So she knew her major donor's family were there, and it had hit the news. And so the first thing she did was emailing him and said, I know your sister and her family are over there. Are they, you know, I'm just thinking of you and really hoping that they're okay. He emailed back saying, yeah, you know, thank goodness they're fine. Are you doing any relief work over there? Which they were. And he went on to make another gift. But, you know, we would do that normally. And I think sometimes our cultures actually, it can feel like we're kind of stopping ourselves from doing that. So I think kind of just connecting with that natural instinct that a lot of us have, that, as you said, donors are people. You know, you're here, you care about things, you've got your own life, you've got your own, you know, things you want to make a difference to, and your own pressures is really important. And I think when it's done well, it's just really great to hear your examples. It's really magical. And I think that's the thing that a lot of fundraisers love about this area of fundraising, is that you can build that up more one-on-one than maybe you can with, you know, mass fundraising. It's not so easy to do if you've got, you know, 20.
Right, and oh, you froze for a second. Are you there? Yes, now you're there. So I think that one of the big pieces I have that I suggest, you know, yes, it's trust, it's relationship, it's all of those things. It's also a kind of a little tool that I suggest people use, is pretend that you're the donor. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, has donated something. Whatever it is, it can be an old jacket, it can be it can be a large amount of money, it can be anything in between, it can be your time, but which of course you're all doing, I'm sure. But if you just think of the person as a human being, what is a human being going through? Because the people with a lot of money are also human beings. They also might have kids running around the house. They also might they're probably doing Zoom calls all day long. It is disruptive. They're not an alien on a different planet that you don't know anything about, that you have to somehow get into the planet and talk their alien language. They're regular people who happen to have money. And the more that you treat them that way, and I realize that there are some exceptions, there are some wealthy people who insist on being treated differently, just like there's, you know, celebrities, whatever, who may or may not even have money, but insist on being treated differently. And whatever, we'll put those people to the side. There's difficult people in every category, but most people and most donors are actually donating because they care, and they are really just like you. And you can bond on the piece that you're working for the organization because you care about the mission, and they also care. So you already have something in common before you even get going. So I think it's important to remember that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good perspective, one that we can all remember. We've got some really interesting questions, and we were going to end up on kind of that piece, but I wanted everybody on this and watching afterwards to know a little bit about the book. So I'm going to share my screen, and she says, share screen, clunky, clunky. So if people want to find out a little bit more, Lisa, before we go on to the questions about Philanthropy Revolution. My slides aren't working, bear with me, I'll bring it up. Where can they go, and what's the best step, and what would you recommend?
Right, so you can just go to philanthropyrevolution.com, or even easier, just go to lisagreer.com, which we just launched a new site yesterday. And that has links to a lot of the previous interviews and articles I've written, many in the UK, and also how to get the book, how to sign up for my newsletter, which is called Philanthropy 451, because I believe that philanthropy is on fire and needs to be helped. So yes, and so here's all the things that you can do, lisagreer.com. And I also tweet every few days, and so there's some things there as well. But we would just love to get to know you and have you be part of this, however you would like to do it. The book is available everywhere, and yeah, and I do see some great questions. So when can we dive into those, Louise?
We'll dive into those. If anybody wants to get in contact with me, I have got a QR code, which I will just get up. I've got a Facebook group, which is free. So I'm doing some short Facebook lives because some people prefer like these kind of 10-minute, like really snappy, kind of to the point sessions. So that's the Summit Fundraising Major Donor Group. So you can join that. And I do consultancy, and I train and I coach fundraisers as well. So I will bring this up, and if any of that's of interest, feel free to get in touch. There's no obligation to work together. I love meeting new fundraisers and trustees and chatting. So this is a snazzy thing that if you put your phone out and you open your camera, it actually brings up a little website that you can kind of get in touch. So if you did want to get in touch, yeah, we can have a chat before Christmas or in January, and my Twitter handle and everything's there as well. And I do loads of tips for free, as Lisa does, on the Facebook group and on Twitter and LinkedIn, and fortnightly on emails. But let's dive in to the questions. Yeah. So I love this one. What's your most memorable experience of stewardship? So after a donation, Lisa, what's something that really sticks out as just a lovely experience that you've had?
In a good way. There's a lot that stick out in a bad way, but in a good way. I would say that, gosh, there actually are quite a few. I think, well, I know, there is an orchestra that is a Arab Jewish orchestra in Israel that we actually had come to our home. We've done over 200 salons over the last 8-9 years. And it's all young people. They're all in high school or early in university. And they came to our home one night. It was a little bit chilly. We brought in some heaters and we were outside. And I think it was almost a year ago. And it was, I can't even describe how wonderful it was. It was, you know, to be involved. We've given them a little bit of money, then we've helped to bring them over. And we had a nice group of about 100 people. And these young people came and sang with just body and soul. They were so beautiful. And it just made me smile. It made me feel good to be part of this world. So that's one of them.
Thank you. And thank you for the questions. Great question. I know quite a lot of charities this year have been working that much harder, which is lovely to see, at kind of connecting donors with their gifts. So I know quite a few I've been working with have been doing more kind of like video messages as well. And obviously some people want a formal report, and they want a, you know, maybe they've got a family foundation and they want to take that, you know, 4 pages of all of the impact. But for other people, those kind of little stories and that little, actually, I was out in the field, or this comes straight up from the field, I thought of you and I thought you might want to see the impact you're making. Those little touch points, I think, can be really lovely, as well as like the bigger kind of gestures.
Yeah, I think the storytelling piece is a really big part of this. And if you're not good at storytelling, you should get good at storytelling, and just bring around other people from your family or people who don't know about the organization, and give them those little anecdotes and those little stories and what it felt like. And that's what it's all about. It's what does it feel like to be contributing to something that's making a difference? And I think that's hugely important. And giving information, by the way, good, bad, and ugly. very important. So if you just say everything's going great, you know, how are things going right now with COVID? And the other person says, it's going great, we're just so lucky. And I think like, no, you're lying to me. It can't be growing just great. Yes, you may be lucky that you're still here, but tell me it was really, instead if you say to me, you know, it was really, really tough at the beginning and we had to do this and this and this, we've gotten through it. We're still looking to the future and hoping it's okay. I am going to enjoy that conversation so much more, and I'm not going to flee, which is what I want to do with that first conversation.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. Thank you. There's a few questions around kind of research and GDPR, which is European data protection regulations in the UK. It's kind of a big topic. I have been wondering whether to do a completely separate webinar on it, but a few people saying, like Kay's mentioned, that they've got a strict GDPR route around consent. So they don't think that they can call some of their donors. And a few people say, you know, they haven't got kind of phone numbers. And how can you get to know if a donor is able to give at a higher level? So, I mean, for me, one of the things we do in the UK, Lisa, is we do a little bit of homework. So kind of wealth research, it's called, and there are a few hoops you have to jump through, but it's completely in Europe and the UK, it's legal in line with GDPR. So for example, if you have it in your privacy policy that you're using information in the public domain, like those wealth companies were, for example, you're looking on a company's house and you put it in your privacy policy, and then your donors have to have had that privacy policy to have the right to object. So that's kind of how it works. And you can do that under legitimate interest, which doesn't quite answer your phone question, Kay, but there's two grounds under GDPR, it's consent and legitimate interest. And as long as that is clear, and then, I mean, my view, I'd love to get yours, Lisa, is a lot of donors, certainly I've met, if you have to wealth research them, it comes under GDPR if you're going to find out where they work or where the directorships are. Now, if I'm going to meet someone on the board at Goldman Sachs, they expect me to know they're on the board at Goldman Sachs. So I think because there was quite a few scandals in the UK and the charity world around this research, I think it's put a lot of nervousness. Certainly a lot of philanthropists and donors who've been spoken to when this came in and the charity said like, oh, you know, this is our new policy, I'm sure you've heard about everything with GDPR. They're like, well, I expect you to do that. I think sometimes we're more hung up in it and we're nervous about it than maybe donors are. What's your experience, Lisa, and what's your kind of thinking on it?
Well, I do expect everybody to do some sort of basic research on me before I meet with them. And if somebody sits across from me and says, this is a very typical thing. Oh, you look so lovely. Oh, where'd you get that shirt? Oh, where did you get that jewelry? Oh gosh. And say, and how did you come about? How did it happen that you started being a donor? And I just want to hit them. I don't.
Right. They clearly haven't read the book. It's in the first two pages.
Yeah, it's awful. It still happens. And so I recommend that everybody looking for money, every fundraiser or part of a nonprofit should do a 5-minute Google search on anybody that you interact with. Look, at the universities have been doing searches on your Facebook and Google, et cetera, for years as part of the application process. That's just been done. It's a standard piece. And so to say, no, I don't want to do that, I feel like it's intrusive. It's sort of just a basic thing that you expect people to know. And so in 5 minutes, you can usually get enough information so that you can, that potential funder you're speaking to can feel comfortable that you actually did your homework. Because if you didn't, I mean, I was in the entertainment industry. If someone came in and pitched a film but didn't know, and said to the person, oh, what is it that you do here? And didn't really know, they would be thrown out of the office. So I think that's really, really important. On the question of how do you contact them, through that Google search or however however your research is done, you will be able to find out things about them that are connected to people in your database. And if you have a well-honed database that is really has information on every donor, not just how much they gave and how much their house is worth, but really some personal pieces about them, like they also love animals or they whatever, you will start to find connections. So if you want to find, Joe Smith, and Joe Smith says you want to find him and you know he has money, but you don't know how to connect with him, you don't have a phone number, then go look at the things that Joe Smith is interested in and go into your database. And this is why it's so important to have those conversations and then be able to have your database, in sectors really of all different types. So everybody who loves dogs is in this section. And then you find somebody who says, oh, sure, I'll make an introduction. And by the way, donors typically really want to help. They don't want to be helping just with money. Some yes, but most no. And so I am so pleased when somebody asks me for help that doesn't have to be with money, because it means they see me as a whole person, and I'm happy to help them. And if that help is saying, oh yeah, you can contact this person, here's their email, use my name, or or here's their phone, I'll call them first for you and tell them you'll be calling, or I'll do an email introduction. Great. That is the very, very best way you can connect with them. And it's even better than actually having their phone number at the beginning.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? And I talk a lot with charities about having a link. What's your link to that person? You know, trustee boards sometimes say Richard Branson, you know, well, why? He has wealth, but he doesn't have any necessarily interest, or you haven't got a link. So, and Carolina, going back to your question, I think around how do you get to know a donor is able to give at a higher level? I think, yeah, there is a Google search, but there's also that if somebody's introducing you, if a trustee knows somebody and is introducing you to a high net worth individual, or like you said, Lisa, if you're introducing a nonprofit to one of your contacts, you'll know a bit about them, won't you? So actually, firsthand finding out, I often find that step can be missed. So remembering that step of, oh, great, Lisa, I'm so glad you're introducing me to this person to us. You know, I couldn't find out that much about them. Do you know what kind of causes they're really interested in? Or do you know what their, views are on philanthropy? Or do you know, and just actually finding a little bit out about them from a person who knows them, so you can do that with your trustees or your other donors, is actually the best research you can get, because it's from someone who's experienced them as a person rather than just on the internet.
And by the way, that wins in both areas, right? Because the fact that you're asking me as a donor about them because you're interested, and you're asking not how much money do they have, you're asking questions about, is this something you think they might be interested in? I would be so impressed that somebody asked me that I would want to give them more, and I'm going to give them that information so that person can give them money, hopefully. So, and by the way, if the person says to you, well, you know what, I think you're barking up the wrong tree, that person really isn't going to be somebody who's appropriate for this organization, you need to accept that. And of course, the proper answer at the end of that is thank you very much. But by the way, we are trying to expand our reach. And is there anybody else that you can think of in your world that might make sense for this, that we could introduce to, that might be interested in our organization? And then you win on both sides. Yeah,
brilliant. And I think as next year, hopefully, things improve and there may be more face-to-face events, I think that's a great thing to do as well. If you're putting an event on, to be asking people, it's a nice thing for you to ask people to, if they might like that event, isn't it, Lisa? You're kind of to be able to pass that invitation on, and it to come from someone that they know rather than maybe a non-profit they don't know very well.
Right.
So I think when you're thinking about your events plan for next year, and actually who are you going to invite, I think it's also who does that invitation come from. And if you've got trustees and other donors, they might really want to bring other people along. They might be really proud. They probably are quite proud that they're associated with you. So that can be a really good route.
Yeah, there's the saying that that you don't get if you don't ask, or if you don't ask, you don't get. And if you don't ask the question to these donors, if you don't get to know them, if you don't say to them, what, we're really looking to expand, do you have any ideas? Then the donor is going to feel less connected, and you won't be able to expand. And so just bringing them into the conversation and showing that you are not just a quote checkbook, even though people don't write checks as much anymore, but really you're not just the piggy bank. We actually appreciate that you are not an inanimate object, that you are a real, living, breathing person, and just that respect and honesty and real relationship, the attempt to have a real relationship, it just pays off in spades.
Thank you. Rory, we're definitely going to answer your question because you helped to set this up, which hopefully it's been helpful for people, and because it was Giving Tuesday yesterday. So Lisa, what was your experience of Giving Tuesday, and what tips have you got for charities on how they could maybe do it better next year? And I would say in what's become a very crowded, very busy marketplace. So how did you find it as a donor?
So, well, you'll read about this in the book. Hopefully, it's not my favorite day. I think that giving someone described it great for me a few years ago, and they said, well, so it's what is there about Tuesday that makes it better than giving on a Monday? Should I not give on a Monday anymore? Should I give on a Wednesday? And I know that sounds a little silly, but it's a very strange thing. I do see that it works, that people do give money. I love that a lot of the social media companies got involved this year and had fun graphics and give and all of that. But I also read a statistic. I also feel like, first of all, I wake up every year I kind of take a look. Rory's so funny. Rory actually emailed me first thing to say, okay, how many emails did you get? I think I had 90 or 98 when I woke up in the morning. And by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had people, the same organizations emailing again, it's still Giving Tuesday, please give your money now. And I'm like, give me a break. So first of all, the organizations that I'm a part of, they should not be barraging me with 5 emails that day about Giving Tuesday. So you should be culling your list, and I shouldn't even be on those lists. The other is I got Giving Tuesday stuff that was for somebody else that was, had a different name on it, which was really offensive. So it's such a big thing, and there's so much pressure to join in it that I think people make a lot of mistakes. So, but there is money that comes from it, and I understand that. And a couple of pieces about it that I made me a little less angry about it. One is that, and I understand how it started. When it started, one of the areas was, it was not just about giving money, it was about giving anything. It was about giving time, it was being about volunteering. And in some different parts of the US and parts of the UK, people really were volunteering on Giving Tuesday. I don't know a single person who was volunteering on Giving Tuesday. And I also don't know any, I didn't get any emails, not one of those 98. And by the end of the day, it was a couple hundred. Not one of them said, can you volunteer? If you can't do this, can you volunteer by doing that? None of them. And so that whole original idea of Giving Tuesday, which got it going, has sort of gone awry. And I think that's a problem. I did read a statistic yesterday that most of the donors from that give on Giving Tuesday only give on Giving Tuesday. So I want everyone to really listen to that, because yes, maybe it's another group of people that don't give another way, and you accept that, but then don't send it to your regular donors. Accept that it's like, I don't know that anyone's taking a Giving Tuesday email and forwarding it to a friend and say, hey, it's so exciting, it's Giving Tuesday, you need to give now because it's Giving Tuesday. It's like saying, you need to give me money because it's the 4th quarter and I didn't make my number. And as a donor, I'm like, that's your problem, not mine. So, but if it is a different kind of category of people that will only give when it feels like a worldwide event, then okay, let's let that be, but then don't barrage your existing donors with it.
Yeah, and I've seen we've got Big Give campaign in the UK backed by the Reed Foundation, and that's a matching campaign. And I've seen and heard of some charities in the last couple of weeks it goes live on Giving Tuesday, the matching campaign, but having really positive conversations with supporters. So it's kind of a vehicle to have, so it's still got that personal element. It's not spamming, people with lots and lots of Giving Tuesday. So that's been quite interesting. So
yeah, and I think the subject lines drive me crazy, by the way. So I've written about this on the blog and in the book. That are it's Giving to it's there's only 2 more hours of Giving Tuesday. So why do I care? That's not, or it's finally Giving Tuesday, and which makes it feel like, I got a bunch of those, which makes it feel like, oh, you've been sitting around doing nothing for the last 3 months, waiting for it to be Giving Tuesday, which is crazy. So, but the ones that do talk about the matching gifts, I did think that was extremely useful. That did catch my attention. And the ones that said something else, or just, it's Giving Tuesday and we're just letting you know that we want to say thank you, that will make me open up that email. But if somebody says it's Giving Tuesday ! Which I got about 30 of, I'm not going to go anywhere. And here's the thing that also happens. Sometimes they're so annoying that I will, like if it says it's finally Giving Tuesday, I will look at the organization, and if I'm giving to them already, I don't want to give to them anymore because it's so off-putting. So there is danger in writing a subject line or an email that could potentially be construed as offensive.
Thanks, Lisa. Michael Hodgins asked, he said, thank you for sharing your experiences. And when you were moving towards IPO and were, in your words, kind of not really donors, if a fundraiser had got in contact with you and it would have likely been a cold approach, how would you have felt at the time? Do you think you would have expected that they were getting to know you properly, or would you have actually believed them if they'd said that? Or maybe would you have been more cynical, I think is where the kind of question is going, if you'd have been approached rather than obviously what you did, which was to identify causes and go to them?
If somebody, it depends. It's back to that research part. If somebody says, we see that your husband's involved in whatever, Crohn's Association, or we see that you're very involved in your synagogue. We have a project that we do that involves, whatever, Jews or synagogues or whatever it is. And we'd love to tell you more about it. That feels authentic. And so I would have loved to know about it. That would have been great. Or if somebody said, we see that you were involved in a Crohn's golf thing and your husband played golf, is this, or he, something about us. And if you connected it, so if you connected it between the homework and what you knew about us, and then you said, I would like to talk to you a little bit about our organization and maybe some other organizations and what the landscape is. Or you could even say, look, we know this IPO is coming. We think it's very exciting. It must be a nervous time for you, but we would love to, no doubt you're going to be doing philanthropy and giving. I would love to help you through that process a little bit to kind of help you learn the rules of the road. Obviously, I'm doing it because I have an organization as well that could use your money, but I would love to sit down with you and help you learn. Boy, that would have been the most amazing phone call ever.
Thank you. I'm sure that's really helpful on behalf of Michael. And last question, I think, because we're really keen to get you away bang on time, because it's either early and you've got a day ahead of you, or it's late and you want to crack on. So Deborah Callan's asked, what level of detail do you ask your beneficiary charities when they're reporting on the impact? What do you like? What kind of inspires you around that impact? So formal reporting with lots of data, or what floats your boat, I suppose?
Yeah, short. We call it short attention span, or short attention span theater. People talk about in Los Angeles. It's like, really just like sound bites. The most impressive ones are, first of all, that they're not dense with content, but they do have numbers. Numbers are really important. And I used to be a career counselor, and I told people that really, to get a prospective employer's attention, make sure your resume, your CV has information on numbers, dollars, and names. And so if you have numbers, dollars, and names in your report, and they're done in a way of, maybe it's a larger font for a bigger piece of information, or it's little like bubbles about major things you did, or it's maybe a showing a timeline of what happened this year, and here's some of the highlights. All of that is hugely impressive to me, and I love it. And then David, the guy from Big Sunday, sends a personal note a couple times a year and says, I just want to let you know how much you're appreciated, and here's the impact we've had, and here's the people that have been involved, which is great. But I would say the more clear it is, and not, like, get to the facts, just specific facts. We did this, we did 3 times more than this. We helped 200 families. And by the way, if you helped 2 people, and I've given you $20,000, and it's not going to fly very well. So you might want to cater that to me, because I'm going to say, wait a minute, I gave you all that money, you helped 2 people. Is that really what I wanted? So you really need to think about what you're sending them. But I think the ones that I like the best are, it'll have like some different numbers, and says, what are these numbers? 5 is number of years we've been doing this event. 12, number of organizations that we helped. That stuff is perfect for me, and I think probably for other people. I think the days of people reading full annual reports and getting a list of all your donors and all of that stuff, I would be hard pressed to tell you anybody I know who actually has read an annual report from a nonprofit, cover to cover. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, and somebody's just said in the comments, Kathy, yeah, infographics are the way to go, definitely. And I see a load of nonprofits doing that, and a lot of charities doing that, and doing it digitally as well, which is brilliant. So yeah, that kind of 40-page glossy kind of posted out feels pretty dated. I think, unless you know your donor and you know that that's what they like.
Yeah, and you might have to do it anyway for governmental reasons, and to compliance stuff. And if you do, then great. But first of all, I wouldn't spend the money on it, on printing it. I don't think it needs to be printed. Even if you print a few in a short range printing thing, that's great. But when I get a printed annual report and I donate to the organization, I'm usually not happy, because I can tell if it's glossy and beautiful and full. All I think about is, oh my gosh, all the money that must have gone into this thing that could have been used for mission. So if you need to do the information anyway, do it in the least expensive way possible that complies with everything you need to comply with. And if somebody wants those, great. And you can also, there's nothing wrong with querying your donors. There's nothing wrong with sending them a 1 or 2 question, what's it called? What's the monkey one?
Survey.
Yeah. Survey monkey or something like that. And one of those questions can be, we're preparing our annual report. How interested in you are receiving how would you like to receive it, or not at all?
Great
I think
idea.
that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you everyone for joining. It is a great book, and it's a really easy read as well, which is just wonderful. It's really well written. And thank you for sharing your experiences in the book and here, Lisa, because there's plenty of philanthropists who will be thinking exactly the same and who won't speak out for obvious reasons. And actually, I think, to be able to learn from your experiences is brilliant. So thank you. And thank you for joining us, everybody. If it's not too early, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I hope you'll get a break, and yeah, let's hope 2021 is different. I think it will be. Thank you for joining, everyone. Take care.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, we will be emailing the recording. Zara's just asked, so you will get it. Everybody who registered will get the recording, and then obviously if you want to forward that on, brilliant. Oh, what a lovely comment, Lisa. Did you hear that? Sophie said, best webinar I've been on all year.
I just saw that. I'm so excited.
And there's been a lot in the year of Zoom and a pandemic. Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah, that is saying a lot.
Right. With everything virtual. And I like Sue's comment, really insightful and a bit shocking in parts. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if that was your plan, Lisa, with the book, but I think actually that shocking element to shock, you know, the sector into really thinking about how something might be received, I think it's important to kind of, I think you get those experiences over really well.
Thank you, everybody. This is just phenomenal feedback. I really appreciate it.
I can probably save the comments and ping them over to you, Lisa, because it's always
that's what I'm thinking. The chat piece.
Yeah, I can save
when you turn it off, it goes away. Yeah.
I think.
Well, I'm going to cut and paste them real quick, just so that,
Yeah.
just in case. So don't turn it off.
Ah, Michael's got the book on his Christmas list. Which is great.
Oh, that's so nice! Yay!
How's the printing going? For people still on, basically, you ran out of books, didn't you, for a while, which is a nice problem to have. But how have you kind of got a few more? Have you managed to overcome that challenge?
There's plenty of books in the UK right now. There was a printing issue. There was evidently a paper shortage, I heard, but all sorts of weird COVID things. But I do have confirmation that there's a good number of books in the UK right now.
Oh, that's good, because it's doing so well. I've copied and pasted them, Lisa, so don't worry. I can send that across to you afterwards. No problem. Yeah, like that. Very validating, Georgia says, to hear you both speak about this in a way that resonates so much. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for your time, Lisa. I really enjoyed it. It's been really nice to see you again.
Thank you, thank you. I'm also going to copy the Q&A that we didn't get to. You might want to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I will, because it's good to know what people. Oh, the Q&A. You have to go into open and answered.
Oh, hold on.
Because I was kind of ticking them off when they got answered, if that makes sense.
Ah, thank you, thank you.
So they're not, so I could read them a bit more easily.
Okay.
And Louise has already bought your book.
Yay!
She says thank you. Longing to read it. Yeah, it's maybe Christmas will be the time.
Yeah.
Maybe Christmas will be the time. Hopefully, a lot of people get a bit of downtime, a bit of rest, and be able to. Do you know what? I'm going to put the questions on the same document, Lisa. So we'll have it all in one place.
Yeah.
Which will be quite handy. And what I'll do is I'll let when we end, Lisa, I'll let my laptop whir with the recording. I'll stop the recording now.